Welcome back. This is Raising Men. My name is David Whalen, and I'm here today with Mark Popovic. As I've said, previously on many podcasts, I am blessed and grateful for some incredible people in my life. If you've been following along with the Raising Men podcast, we did an incredible episode with Megan Popovic, Mark's sister. I've had the opportunity to spending some time with Mark's dad and getting some support and advice from him, and incredible family. So I'm again grateful to have Mark Popovic on our podcast today. Mark is a former number 4 overall, I believe, draft pick to the OHL. He won the World Juniors with Canada. He's played in the NHL. Runs an incredible program in Colorado. But I'm so lucky to have this his family in my life, and obviously have Mark on the call. So without further ado, Mark, welcome to the podcast.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
Hey, no problem. I hope my intro has been okay. But yeah, man, let's tell us about yourself.
Yeah. You already did quite a bit for me. I'm a father of 3. I got 2 young boys and a young daughter, beautiful wife, and we live here in Colorado. As you mentioned, I'm a longtime pro hockey player. I played 15 years, kind of all over the place, from Russia to the NHL and the minors. And,
Wow.
it was great. I'm running youth programs now, skill stuff. So we got little ones all the way up through college pro guys, loving what I'm doing now, giving back and trying to use the game of hockey to raise good men and women. So
Awesome.
I guess I'm going to throw in there a part-time musician too. That's the thing nobody knows about me that I hide.
So. No, man, that's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, I've obviously learned a lot about you through your dad, having great conversation, and obviously our conversations that we've had. But yeah, man, like I want to dig in. I want to kind of know how you got to where you are, maybe what's influenced you obviously through all of that, and your perspective now, because I think my kids training with Rick Ferroni, going into the GTHL, playing hockey there, and the experiences that I'm having. And so I know I have a ton of questions, and then I know, it relates to a lot of other parents, and kind of get an idea of what you've been through it all, and you've kind of been to the top of the food chain and getting there, and your experiences, and maybe what you would suggest for dads and for any parents really going, raising their kids, and maybe what you would do differently. And anyway, man, any advice that you can give. But in saying that, if you can give me a little bit of a history of like you growing up, and maybe what influenced you the most, and who are your greatest mentors?
Yeah. Grew up in Stony Creek, Ontario, just outside Hamilton. Great childhood there. Got an amazing mom and dad, as you know. My dad loves to talk, so and my older sister is 2 years older than me. It was a good childhood. I grew up going to school with Rick Ferroni, one of your guests and your kids' coach.
Yeah.
We also played youth hockey together and everything, and we, to this day, we are still one of the closest friends. He's one of the closest friends I have in the world. So I had a great childhood. I people ask me a lot about when I was younger. I honestly don't remember much. I remember roaming Stony Creek on my bike and having a lot of freedom. And I remember it was fun, which I think it's how it's supposed to be. And that's hockey, and that's, school and all that. On the hockey side, I ended up playing in Toronto. I was in 7th grade. So back then that was minor peewee.
Yeah.
We moved, my dad moved in there. I'm sure it was a process that was in the gray area, how you get to play in Toronto, like they probably still do nowadays. I'm not sure how it goes, but I started playing Don Mills. So I started going around to different Toronto teams for 3 years. Had some really good success there. Toronto Young Nats, we lost in the Quebec Pee Wee final, which is going on this week. A lot of fun, good hockey players. I look at that group there, those teams I played on, and every one of them had future NHLers, up to 5. Some of those top teams, as they still do produce, quite a few hockey players. I ended up playing junior hockey, tier 2, Mississauga Chargers. When I was still 14 when I started, so I was a 15-year-old double underage, which I believe they're not allowed to do anymore. Then, like you mentioned, I got drafted to the OHL. I decided to go that route, and played 4 years at St. Mike's before being drafted to the Mighty Ducks in 2001, and played pretty long career. That's a short, the hockey version of it, but I figure you want to dive more into stuff. So that's the Wikipedia version of my youth hockey career. Actually, you mentioned who's my big influences. This is where I want to go with this conversation. I hate giving the light stuff about where I played and all that.
Yeah, man.
And I'd say my father, number one.
Yeah.
He's a rock and the smartest, hardest working man I've ever known.
Yeah.
For sure, him. I'm blessed with an amazing family. Nowadays, also growing up, my sister was always there. My mom. I had good people.
Yeah.
Who was a role model growing up. There's almost too many to count. And this is the honest truth. Even to this day, I have so many close friends, not friends that we just talk sports and light stuff, but I could pick up the phone and talk whatever I need to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always had that in my life. And there's so many of them that, Rick being one of them. So what I'm going to say is I'm a blessed person having a lot of people who've cared about me as a person, not just as a player.
That's
and
awesome.
I'm thankful and respect all of them.
Yeah, I've absolutely felt that energy from your sister and your parents, your mom, your dad, little Max. We've been able. I even had a bit of a text conversation with your sister this morning, and I just said, thank you, obviously, because I'm grateful to obviously have had this time to share with you and have you on the podcast, but also just being around the family. And there's a lot of, your dad and I have tons of conversations around, my children and how to keep them away from the negative energy and keep things happy and healthy and positive. And so that's kind of, where I'm focused. And, again, I think there's a lot of parents that are in similar place. They want to do what's best for their children and they want to give them the best lives they possibly can and support them in their dreams. And so, having somebody like yourself that's been through it and can kind of speak in terms of, the things that have helped guide them and help make them successful, and maybe things that that you might feel are sort of irrelevant that, you get trapped into in the business world of hockey. I know you and I have spoken about that. I'm, obviously speaking with your dad and Rick, know that you've trained with Dr. Shmushkin. How did you feel about, I know your dad spent tons of time on the road driving you to practices and training. How did you feel about all that stuff? Like, what, maybe experiences do you have as a youth training in hockey and sort of, where that might have taken you?
Yeah. Our little group of Stony Creek hockey players was pretty awesome. My dad, Rick's dad, we had some very invested fathers who were willing to be crazy enough to be at the rink all the time. My dad realized the value of putting a little extra in. And he, wherever that was, local people around Hamilton early on, and then finding some of the trainers in Toronto. And just for the audience and stuff, this is the 90s. There's a different world. That's a huge business now, and I run summer camps and different things. Back then, it wasn't like it was now. So for someone to skate as much outside of their team programming and stuff as I did was unique, and I probably did a little more than most people. And I loved going to Toronto and skating with Dr. Yasser Shmuskin. Early on, it'd be 6 hours a day on the ice. We'd do 3 a.m, take a break and go back for 3 p.m. And I was, I played competitive lacrosse. I was playing lacrosse up through when I was playing the OHL, and I loved it. I love being on the ice. I'm a student, no matter what it is. It can be. I like to learn. So for me to stand in line and watch a coach tell me something and challenge me to do something different, that was right down my alley. And so I definitely think it helped me in my career. I didn't find it was something that burned me out, but I was also pretty driven to do it. And I enjoyed it. It was something I found fun. I would, looking back at when I was in Toronto or going into junior hockey, the biggest advantage I had was my skating. I was a better skater than everybody else. And as a defenseman, that's just a huge advantage to, create time and space, or on defense, close that gap. So I think it really helped me. And that took a crazy dad to drive into the rink all those hours and put the money in. You're driving to Toronto or Westwood Arena, wherever, or Chestwood, which ones we were at, and it was a big commitment on his part. And he would take his vacation time and use those weeks to drive me to the rink.
Mhm.
And that's love and care.
Yeah. And your dad, again, through the conversation, like most of that training was done in the summer. And he'd mentioned, because I'd asked him, I said, how much extra would you do during the season? And I think it's always a question of like, what's enough, what's too much, like I hear about kids at 10 years old now training every day and a couple hours on the ice every day. And I, like, personally, when I see some of it, I see the kids playing, I don't see the transition or how it translates like all the time training, and I don't see them necessarily excelling. I do understand the value of training in the summer. So in your opinion, based on obviously doing what you do now, and your experiences, how do you feel? If it's your kids, where are you investing your time and energy?
I'll talk general. I'll talk. I'll kind of address all those different things. Youth hockey is a lot more demanding now, especially in a state like Colorado. If you're playing high level, the travel demands, and it's intense. So during season is a busy time. These kids are exhausted. They're going to school. A lot of them are doing sports schools. There is a lot going on, and it almost becomes a job. And I understand you talk, like, most of the parents are educated. It's generally a white collar sport. You in theory, if you have consistent long-term development where you're at the rink this amount of hours for this many weeks per year for this many years, you're going to develop. We're not dealing with machines. These are little kids, and things come in spurts. And when a kid is having fun and enjoying things, their brain's open to learning, creating new motor patterns. So I think you got to realize these kids are not adults. They're small. If season is exhausting because of school and all these other demands, well, maybe that's when you lay off the development. Maybe you use it in the summertime. Maybe some kids can be at the rink all the time. So everyone's different. I see a lot of these kids, and we see hundreds of them in the summer with my camps and stuff. And some of them are burnt out pros. It looks like they've been through 25 years of pro hockey, and they just, they are going through the motions. And it's sad for me to see that. And there's other kids who skate a lot who love it. So everyone's different. I would say just when your kid asks you to go to the rink, when those moments that they are dialed in and enjoying it, man, those are the ones you jump on as a parent and go for it, because that's when they're ready to learn. If they are, don't want to get out of bed early and they're exhausted, and you can tell in a game if they're just not having fun, well, okay, dial it back. So I think that's something you got to, read your own kid and read the situation. There's always somebody who wants to take your money in this business, and don't get sucked into a lot of things. The most important thing is keeping it fun. I'm a huge believer in multi-sports, and there's so much to it that read your kid, keep it fun, make sure they're taking breaks. I always tell parents, if you don't, give them breaks, a couple months off in the spring or summer, they're going to take a permanent one real soon. So it's also, what are you investing into? Some of these things are great experiences. If you want to go to Shattuck St. Mary camp or a Harbor or something, there's also that. It's not just about hockey training. It's also, sometimes this is an experience for this kid that can, be a life-changing thing. Sometimes they're just great bonding moments. You talk about sitting in the car driving to Toronto. Yeah, it was a lot, but that's when me and my dad hung out.
Yeah.
That was our time. So there's a lot more to investing than just the thing. And then I'm sure we'll talk a lot more about all this stuff, but know your kid. Take advantage of the moments that they're engaged and loving the game, because that there's so much research on how kids learn, and when their minds are open and that growth mindset and their brains are so ready for that. That's when the magic happens. You talk about those kids who get burnt out. Well, yeah, but you can't force that on a kid. Eventually that's going to backfire. There's burnout, there's injuries, and honestly, once they become a little bit older, they're going to be teenagers. They're not going to be that 10-year-old boy who does exactly what their dad says. They're going to start making their own choices. And if there's no passion and they're tired, I see it all the time. They're not going to be choosing the one you want them to.
And I guess it leads into another question is things like the brick tournament for 10-year-olds and other spring hockey. They've got all these tournaments popping up here in Ontario specifically that are designed to try to attract, the best kids or the elite kids, or and I think a lot of parents are, from my conversations that I've had and things I've seen, like parents, it's like this race who can have the best kid at 10 or 11 or 12. And then all these spring tournaments, like what's your take on this? I know you and I have shared some conversation, but just for the listener.
Yeah. This is where I'll start being very honest. And there's a lot of craziness out there. And I get the draw to the brick. There's a lot of top kids. One of the hardest thing as a parent in youth hockey is measuring where your kid is at. So it's, there's a huge attraction to having a tournament or having your kid skate with the best kids at that time in that birth year. Right. But as I'm going to look from a business owner, I think it's a phenomenal business model to make some money. You bring all these parents, you sell this exposure, which we'll dive into in a second. And it's not going to make or break your kid's career. The reality is anybody who's a top 10-year-old is they have a parent who got them on the ice for well over 1,000 hours. There's a pretty good chance that kid's going to be an early puberty kid. They're probably born in an early month in the year. Those things to me are not skill, certainly not long-term development. So it's a race to the small group of people. Multi-sport kids don't even kick in until about 15, 16, when their unique skill set of processing situations and spatial stuff starts coming out. And if you're looking at the business side, there's a reason why those coaches really want to coach those teams. You coach one of those brick teams, you can run camps all year round, and you're going to suck in every 6 to 9 year olds within 100 kilometers. And it's just good business coming from someone in that world. And it creates a power dynamic that they use over people. Parents want something from them, and it's a huge industry. And long-term development, it has nothing to do with it. It doesn't matter. I don't even know. Maybe I played in the brick. I can't remember. But so that's how I feel about it. Here's the other side. If you want to do it for your experience and putting your kid into an awkward tryout, because guess what? Tryouts suck. And he's going to, that boy or girl is going to be in a situation where they are around some pretty good players. And that's something that I think is a gift that sports can give you, where you have to learn how to, thrive and be yourself in those situations. So I think exposure to that type of environment is really healthy for kids. If you want to do it because you want to fly to, wherever you're going at New Year's for that one tryout, and then up to Edmonton for that experience and bonding moment with your kid. If you're from the US, you want to go up there and see Canada. Awesome. I think you put it in the category of what it is. It's exposure to your kid for tryouts and that type of stuff. It can be, if used the right way, a great bonding moment and something special between the parents and kid. This power dynamic created by the demand of parents and creates a market where they just extort money out of people.
Yeah. There's and you played in it obviously, and sort of went towards the GTHL, but there's this concept that the GTHL is the best place on the planet to play, and all the best players play there, and you've got to play on the best team, and you've got to have your kid playing up a year, and you have to play on the brick, and then I look at guys like Owen Power, Cale Makar, I go down the list of these like incredible players that had nothing to do with these tournaments. When I spoke to the gentleman who used to sharpen Owen Power skates, he's like 10 years old. Owen Power was terrible. And I think you've said it before, the best kid at a certain age might be playing a house league hockey or something right now. Like who knows? But there is this, and I think it's great hearing from yourself, because there is this idea that at 9, 10, 11, you need to be playing like the absolute best level of hockey you can, or you're irrelevant. And, hearing it from yourself, obviously.
Yeah. Well, I think that, like I mentioned a couple things, there's an industry that's driving it. There's a lot of money out there to be made. And then the other side with parents, what I find is it's out of love and fear. There's a love that you want to give your kid every opportunity you possibly can.
Mm-hmm.
And if this is what you're constantly hearing, and you're somewhat new to travel hockey at that age, even if you feel like you're not, you still are. That's a young child there.
Yeah.
You don't want to miss out on things, and it's that fear of missing out. Or if I don't do this, if look, oh, this kid's going over to this club, and it's hard not to get caught up, not just in youth hockey, like in life. It's hard not to get caught up in that type of. It comes from love and fear, and I totally get it. And I respect the parents. My job, any parent called me at that point, I would calm them down and then think about, opportunity costs. What are the pros and cons? That's, if you can just take a breath. To me, there's no right or wrong. Just be willing and create enough space for yourself, or maybe have some awesome people around, like you can have a conversation like this to think things through, and then make an educated decision on what's best for my kid long-term development, what's best for their fun level, what's best for my wallet. And that's, there's no answer that for everybody. It's not one thing. But I think the way this whole thing works, and it just churns and it happens so fast that people don't take a breath. And my challenge would be to any parent, well, that's your job as a parent, to think things through and slow down and teach your child how to do that in life. And these things, it's not going to make or break your kid's career. If anything, it's probably going to lead to breaking it, because it's exhausting, and kids are not ready to be put through those tryout situations, at least not, if you're looking at developmentally and all the research on long-term person development, it's you can say, yeah, my kid's different, but I'm not talking from my opinion. This is lots of research on it. So it's up to you if you want to expose your kid to that or not. It's up to you if you want to spend the money. And like I said earlier in this podcast, there's always someone ready to take your money and tell you this is an exposure tournament, which is an interesting word to me for little kids. You're paying for three things. You're paying for access to games, which every single kid plays on a winter season. That's already probably too many games along. So when you ask me about spring and all this other stuff, you're just extending something that's not doing much development, and it's probably too long. You're paying for development, which might, because of the youth hockey model, and we can talk about this after this, everybody has to pay for that on the side, going to skating coaches or this, or you're paying for an experience, and which is doing something with your dad and the boy, or you're going to a cool camp, which, it's not about development. It's just because it's stinking awesome. Exposure, if you notice, I didn't put exposure in any of those things, or elite. You're paying for access to games. You choose where you want to play and how many you want to do. If you want to keep it, make it a 10-month season, play spring hockey. Development, just know what you're paying for. So I don't put that in development or access. It could be access to games. It extends, it gives you a few more. That would be, in my opinion, into the experience category. And if this is something you want to do as a family, go do it. Don't get sucked into that other stuff. I don't know if that makes sense, or I explain myself very well, but that's, those are the, that's your time, that's your money, that's your kid. There's three things you're paying for. Sometimes they overlap, but for the most part, they don't, in the youth hockey worlds. And just be aware of which one you're putting your money towards.
Yeah. I, as an example, I have a cousin that's going to be drafted to the OHL this year. He's a U16 player here in Ontario in the GTHL, and he played AA up a year until minor Bantam, and then he moved into AAA with the GTHL. He's also like a Canadian ranked lacrosse player. I spoke to him. I said, "Hey, like what really made a difference for you?" And he said, "I'm at home by myself, stick handling, or I'm shooting pucks. I play lacrosse in the summer, and I work out. I don't do a ton of extra because obviously his parents aren't rich." But when you watch him play, his game translates to the future. He's a strong kid. He's physical. He battles hard. He works hard. Yes, he's a good skater, good player. But he didn't get sucked into these things. And the cool part is that him and his other brothers were all successful, at least in getting drafted the OHL. So something that they're doing as a family is obviously working. Whereas I know there's other kids that, I asked him, I said, who is the best at 10 years old? And he mentioned a bunch of names. I said, how are they now? He's like, no one even knows where they're playing hockey anymore, So I think, again, it's just sort of perspective on that.
I think it's perspective. Even like we're talking about the best 10-year-olds, and you're bringing up his nephew, right?
Yeah.
Who's going to the OHL. We're talking the elite. It's real dealing with results. How do we produce a hockey player when I think the name of your podcast is Raising Men?
Yes.
And I think right now we just need to define what is the success. Where does this conversation want to go? Because you want to talk hockey, yeah, you can do a lot of these things.
Yeah.
At what cost? You're looking where, and I can talk a lot about my experience, and I was a very well-rounded kid. I played other sports. I was a straight A student, finished high school early, but I ended up dealing with a lot of stuff in my life because I focused so much on results and being perfect. And so I'd rather talk, how do we use sport to raise good men? So when I hear talk about the OHL, I'm like, is it, or do you want me to really tell these parents that are mostly dads that are listening how to get their kid to the OHL? Or are we going to say, how do you want to raise it? Like, I don't know where I feel like I think we need to, and I would like to go there today is let's talk about it. Cause like I said, I went to the OHL 4th overall. I could have played for the U.S. development program. I was going to be a first rounder, ended up going 35th to the Ducks. I was a lonely, depressed kid. Tons of anxiety. I didn't know what those words were. I didn't know what that meant back then. I was a really struggling kid in my life, late teens, early into my 20s, because my love of myself and stuff was so tied up in playing in the NHL or making X amount of dollars or a little bit back. What pick I was in the OHL, and I think a lot of that stuff came from being in that system of always chasing better teams.
Yeah, that's
always,
powerful.
You're getting scouted early, and I don't think it was consciously done by anyone, especially not my father. But there's real life, long-term consequences to exposing your kids to this environment and not doing providing the stuff around them and showing them how to handle that type of stuff if not done correctly. And so when I talk about the brick and stuff, I'm picturing that kid at 24 years old. If you go to a tryout or something, or if it's your first camp, and you see a lot of times parents pull kids out of situations. Let me clarify before I go here. If something's toxic or it's abuse, you want to do what's right and get your kid out of there. But for the most part, most parents are pulling kids because they're not getting the ice time, or they don't get the control and guarantees and all this. I'm thinking, what are you doing to these kids? Like, they're gonna go to their jobs in their 20s and not know how to handle a boss telling them that this report sucks, go do it again. They're probably going to be in a marriage and they're going to have a hard time, like every marriage, and they're not going to be willing to do what they need to do to change or work on that. You're teaching this kid that it's all about getting to where you need to be, instead of the gift of sports might be working through those things.
I think that's powerful. I'd love to continue on this as an example of what you're saying. I had an experience this year with one of my boys who was playing on a team, getting tons of ice time, getting to play up a year, getting, all of the extra. And we made a decision to pull him from that team. We took about a month off of playing and decided to join a different team because the environment in that situation was extremely toxic for him. It was extremely unhealthy. And so to me, it didn't matter that he was getting all this extra stuff. I want my son, and a lot of these lessons, obviously talking with your family, your sister, learning through this podcast myself. It's like, and it's also why, for me asking these questions, it's like, hey, I had these questions. I want to raise incredible young boys, and I would love them to be successful in sport. They've had the opportunity to have lots of different really cool coaches in different sports, and I'm as a parent, as a father going through this, maybe much like your dad did, I'm trying to understand and make the right decisions, not necessarily about building, an NHL superstar. I want my boys to be happy. I know they love hockey. I know they're good at hockey. but I want to make positive, healthy decisions. And I also don't want them to deal with some of the issues that I dealt with as a child that have affected my relationships and have affected my, created life challenges. So it's, again, I appreciate your time and appreciate us going in that direction. I mean, I think it's important for people to hear, obviously, that part of it, because I do believe there are a lot of parents, a lot of dads that are chasing or trying to get their kid to a spot where you were, and to hear from you how that impacted your life and how we can be better as fathers, as parents, as people is huge. And I appreciate you sharing that. I think that's a very powerful piece. So thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. And I'm learning too. I got 3 kids. My oldest just turned 11. So, and I love the man who I am today.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of it was because of the hard times in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And sports taught me a lot. It challenged me and it brought me to where I am. And I love having these conversations, being real with young athletes, especially, the older ones, teenage, college age guys. And
Mm-hmm.
These conversations need to happen. So thank you for this podcast, and they're not happening enough. But you mentioned a word and it just jumped on me when you're saying these dads are chasing, and it's like, okay, they're probably chasing a lot of things,
Mm-hmm.
and is that what we want to teach these kids, to always chase that? Is it just, there's no right or, I think if you have the perspective of I'm raising them in, and every decision, or at least a big decision you make, you pause and reflect, and okay, what happens if, you get mad at a coach because your kid wasn't on a power play or something.
Mm-hmm.
And the kid, even if you don't say something, can feel that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you're teaching him to be mad at someone just because he didn't get some, ice time. And that's going to, next time there's a similar experience, the way it works is, you pull upon past experiences, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the challenge for us is just to be aware that they're watching they're listening to our words, they're feeling our emotions. And most importantly, they're watching how we do things in our life. You can come up with any great movie speech for the car ride home, but the reality is the way you deal with stress at work, or, treat your spouse, or if, you're sitting on the couch on your cell phone instead of not engaged with you, that's what they're really absorbing. I think the conversation is, how can we be better to raise better men? And how can we use sport to raise amazing adults who don't need us, who can handle adversity, if they want to get married, are amazing husbands and fathers. And I think the cool thing about sport is you're not there at school. You're not there when they take a test or they get their grade. You are at the rink, and you see how they react. And even more importantly, they probably see how you react. And that's a unique opportunity that doesn't really happen elsewhere in life for such a challenging stuff. Sports challenging. Kids win, they lose, they fail, they deal with authority. You happen to be there, and it's just a good opportunity for us to, and I think just being conscious of, okay, here it is. How am I going to use this, and put that focus off the OHL or college or that next brick team, and what I want for this kid when they're 25.
Yeah. No, I think that's powerful. Sorry, say that again.
No. So a lot of this is just where I'm at in my life as a father too. And I love looking back on it and trying to make good decisions. And I'm sure we'll all mess up our kids are one way or another, and they'll make a choice one day to choose if, they want to do it with their boys and stuff. But no, I think this is a huge opportunity. Obviously you're an engaged parent. If you're driving to the rink and spending money, well, okay, let's take it that next step farther. And I think you can do both. You can raise a great, strong man who's probably could be a great hockey player and still be there for them emotionally and help, show them how to, be a man who can process stuff. And I think you can do both. And I feel like the world's at that moment where this is the conversation we need to have.
Yeah, I think out of my personal life challenges and failures and things that have happened along the way, even, raising my children, I've had to have conversations with my boys and let them know, hey, we could have handled that situation better, or you know what, I made a mistake there, or I think, and one of the things that I heard in a podcast with Gary Vaynerchuk, and I've said this before, he talked a lot about building confidence with your children and letting them know that they're loved, and letting them know that ultimately, whatever the outcome is in their life, that you do love them, and that win or lose, it's okay. For me, with them, it's been mostly about effort. Just put in effort, and have fun, and that's in anything, whether that's their school, or sports, in anything that they do. And again, I as you probably noticed in your own life, it's we learn through our own challenges, and so again, I think it's a great conversation to have. Are there things that you're doing with your children that are because of the challenges that you've had? Is there a way that you sort of operate, or are there tools that you're using to get to sort of help build them, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think for me, there's the good things, the hard work and drive for things. And, I'm somebody who can put my mind on something, and I truly believe I could do whatever, but there also, a lot of those things led to my anxiety. I was so tied up in my identity as a hockey player that I didn't know who the heck I was. And, it was a whole bunch. I think I was a really, really top player, agents were coming to my games at 13, not these advisors. It was like, I knew from a pretty early on age that I was probably going to make the NHL. It was a realistic thing. So and it happens in a time in my life when I was, you're a teenager. It's hard to process a lot of that stuff. So dealing with that anxiety and depression, again, I didn't know what that was at that time. I just couldn't sleep for 3 days, and I didn't have energy, and I was, I didn't want to, do anything. And so for me, I consciously, now going back to my kids, through sport and stuff, I'm very aware of when I provide them with the most attention. So you see dads or something really celebrate a goal, which is awesome. It's fun when your kid scores a goal. But I'm just aware of kids, especially before puberty, want to please their parents. That's how they grow. So if you only are celebrating certain things in their life, they're going to want more of those. And I'm trying to be really aware of when I give them that jolt of that endorphin. And my best ability on the process stuff, hard work, or when they're a kind person, so they want to do more of those, if that makes sense. I'm just trying to be aware of when I use what they're seeking in their life from their father right now, consciously. And I'm hoping that combined with, hopefully, I'm a good role model in their life, and I've changed things in my life for the better, will help lead them to having their identity tied up in those things that I'm rewarding. And hopefully they become the good, strong men that, don't need me when they're 20 years old, and can take on this world and can handle adversity and choose what they want to do. And I think that's where a lot of my focus is okay, where's my attention? When does Mark Popovic most excited with Noah and Nash, my boys? What are they going to want more of from me? I don't know if I'm trying to explain it, but that's,
that makes a ton of sense.
I always think of it, it's like a like on social media, when you give that full attention and excitement, or rewarding, like a hug, like they want more of that. That's just how their brains work, especially at a young age. So I try my best to be aware, use it for what I want them to be like down the road.
Obviously now you've sort of transitioned into, still within the hockey world, but developing youth in the sport. Do your children participate in that? And maybe tell us about that program.
Yep. So I have 3 kids I mentioned earlier.
Mm-hmm.
My boys are 9 and 11. They both play hockey.
Mm-hmm.
So one's a first year 12U here. So what is it? 13 and under in Canada. And the other one's 11 and under
Yeah.
first year.
Yeah.
They enjoy it. The multi-sport kids, my older one loves soccer. That would, might be his number one right now.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty balanced. They play travel hockey, but I don't, we're not doing crazy stuff anywhere outside of their team.
Yeah.
I love coaching them.
Yeah.
I've been involved since they started when they're little.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm a volunteer with the organization outside of my work and stuff. Just for me, that's something my dad growing up did.
Mm-hmm.
And I love it. It only lasts for a couple years. My daughter could skate, but she didn't want to play hockey. She would have been a first year 8U or tyke this year, but she decided she just wants to skate and have fun.
Yeah.
So she's doing that, but I get to coach for I think they're going to be called the Pink Unicorns again. So in soccer, so that comes up here in a few weeks.
Nice.
So I really enjoy the volunteer side.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of my own programming, and we have skill stuff throughout the year and summer camps, and we train older. It's totally up to my kids. So my boys, because of what I do, they can drop in, but
Mm-hmm.
they come a little bit, not too much at this age. I don't push it. This is my job.
Mm-hmm.
I don't, from a side of, I don't want to push my kids to do extra unless they want to do it. That's part of it. But the other side is, again, this is what I work, and I don't, nobody wants to be forced to go to work with their dad all the time. So, if we look at the summer, they'll do some stuff. We try to have a healthy balance. We have, a camper trailer. We're always up in the mountains doing our thing. So
Mm-hmm.
for me, balance. Yes, hockey is a part of our life, and it's fun. Coaching my kid, like my dad did with me, has definitely been one of the more rewarding things I've done as a parent. And I enjoy it. And it can be challenging too. Having your own kid on the team and all that, there's different dynamics. And
Mm-hmm.
if I would say I'm probably harder on my own kids than the other ones. And
Yeah.
about working and being good teammates and, all that kind of stuff. And if we have an extra player or something, it's going to be my kid who doesn't get on the ice first. And, it's just part of daddy's coach. And
Yeah.
if something's going to happen,
Awesome.
it's going to be my own boys. So, I had to sit my 9-year-old last week. He didn't want to go to practice, and I was running 2 teams, and I'm like, fine, stay home. You're gonna have to write a letter to the other coaches, and he was a grocery stick between the forwards and D for the first period, and he sat there and had to show that he was a good teammate before he got on the ice. I'm not gonna yell, but I'm also not gonna reward that. So being a good teammate, being a good friend to all these kids, and learning how to compete. That's the good stuff about hockey at this age, and
Yeah.
and we have a little rink outside our house right now, which is melting today in the weather, but a little 15 by 40 foot shooting pad. But
Nice.
for us, the kids and everybody, it's fun.
Yeah, I found the pond hockey and outdoor stuff has been probably the most enjoyable for the kids. Obviously they love competing and training with the right people, but getting out on the pond and playing hockey with dad, boys love it.
Yeah.
So, in saying that, what might you suggest for dads listening to this, or families, anybody really? How can we be better as dads raising our children in any sport or in life? What are maybe some things that you would say, are extremely important?
I think a big one. What I think is important raising and advice, it would be very conscious of, like I was mentioning with me and my kids, when you are there and what you reward, and when not just giving money or something, but what you reward with your attention and love and excitement, because your kid's going to want more of that. Be aware how you react and what you say, because they're going to react the same way in similar situations down the road. So you might think you're doing your kid a favor by talking bad about a coach's decision not playing them, or pulling them, or only going to a team where you have a guarantee and not putting your kid through a real tryout. But down the road, you're stripping that kid of something that they might have needed, or teaching them to react in a way that's going to hurt them later on. I think just taking a pause if you can and just, all right, what do I want my adult son or daughter to react in a similar situation? And oftentimes that is hard because that requires change in yourself in those situations. So I think, yeah, be better. That's the hard thing in life. But I think with anything, improving and changing and growing as a person, for me, that's an exciting part of going through this life journey and as a dad. And I think that's the opportunity is how do you be a better dad at the rink? How do you be a better dad when they're just observing you in other areas in your life? Yeah. So there's a consciousness, there's a choice, and you have to do it out of love of your kid, but also love of yourself. Because, our legacy is going to be how these kids are as adults, not what they do.
That's powerful. Again, I appreciate it. On a hockey related question, maybe a little bit selfish here, but a question that I have
No worries.
is, on the development side of things, does it matter, about having the fastest player or the best stick handler, or, are those skill sets able to change later on and develop? And I think I know the answer, but I think it's a great question to ask for people that are listening.
No, I definitely, if you're looking at ice hockey and skating, number one, processing and be able to read plays, which is the hardest thing to train, and shooting, yes, they're all important. Movement, it's hard to play hockey. It's usually the limiting factor. Junior hockey, if you can't skate at an NCAA level, you're probably not going to play at the NCAA. Mm-hmm. There's other factors that, size helps, but there's always outliers on both sides, smaller and bigger guys that make it. Yes, there's a range that seems to be at certain levels that mm-hmm. helps, even though that's out of kids' controls or parents. But investing in skills and skating like that's what gave me an advantage over the competition, and it allowed me to have a long career. I probably still could be playing over in Europe if we chose as a family to do that because of my ability to move on the ice.
Yeah.
So I would say that. And the other thing to invest in is just the work ethic and those intangibles, and finding ways to invest and develop those. Because at the end of the day, good attitudes and hard work and those are skills that you develop. And I think they're just as important as, the shooting, the skating and that stuff.
Does it matter that I develop it at, say, 6, 7, 8, 9? Yeah. Or can I develop even skating skill set at, say, 12, 13, 14? Like, am I capable of taking maybe a poor skater at 12 and turning them into a great skater?
Well, first off, hockey's an interesting road because it's a very late peaking sport. If NCAA is a goal of a lot of parents and kids. Well, you have 2 to 3 years after high school until your freshman year. Mostly it's 3. It's you're a 20-year-old freshman. It's not gymnastics for young women or these things that it's really young. So there's no other sport like it. Now, every other sport you go as a true freshman. So it's a really, really long road. So keeping that in mind, if you're looking at the development of the body and athletics, I suggest all of these parents listening right now to spend a little bit of time looking into long-term development models and how there's different things. So there's coordination, before 8 years old, and then there's from 9 to 12, right before puberty is that golden age of skill development and motor skills. And then you're going to, be awkward when you go through that big growth spurt, grade 8 or 9 going into high school. And then when there's another, speed window right after that, when your body, the testosterone kicks in, you start putting on muscle. That's a great window to teach speed and work on the stride. But every kid's different. It's not set. Obviously, some kids hit puberty earlier than others. Some are late. developing, but there are certainly windows that are important to development. Do I think at 6 years old you need to develop all those skills? No. But from 11 to 13 or whatever those few years are right before puberty, those are the best times for those brains to learn those movement patterns. Does it mean it's impossible after that to learn them? No. And having that longer window in hockey, like I said, is a really late peaking sport for most kids. If again, I'm just using college as probably the pinnacle for most people. It's possible. And I think I would say, knowing that better athletes usually end up being better hockey players, multi-sports, playing things like lacrosse, if you really want to focus on the transferable skills, those hand skills, running, you get these athletes or hockey players that never played other sports, and because they end up just playing video games and hockey, they can barely run by 15 years old. Like run, that's a fundamental human skill, especially for it's crazy. So I think developing that athlete well-rounded. I enjoy learning about that stuff. I certainly use it in how I do curriculum building. I try to do what's age appropriate, not selling what people are doing 3 years ahead of them. And that's another thing you always hear, oh, they're doing these overspeed things for 8-year-olds. Well, that's not really when they should be doing that type of development. And that's another thing in this industry. They try to sell things that kids' development that is too not developmentally appropriate. So yeah, investing all the time, be aware of your kid. Keep in mind that early puberty is not a skill. If your kid's small at 12 years old and they're not making AAA teams because of it, don't worry, they all end up being adults. Like a lot of these things are not skills. They're just, it just happens to unfold that way. So I would say, learn about it. Right before puberty is a great time to do skill development. That's when kids they love camps and can skate all day anyways. If you don't hit that window, like my kids might not want to be at the rink, and they say at 14 they want to dive in, well, great. Maybe it's a little harder for them to work on certain things because their bodies don't know that yet. But I think if you're consciously there and you're willing to work, it doesn't matter what age. And again, if the goal is raising good men, maybe making their high school hockey team is a huge success in that life, and investing in that kid that needs to do skating lessons at 14. You might have given a gift. All of a sudden they start connecting hard work with results and self-confidence. So when you talk about, is it okay to, would it be, would you invest in a kid? Yeah, if they got good goals, why wouldn't you as a parent if you're able to provide that?
I love all that.
I don't know. I'm going all over the place, but that's what I enjoy that stuff. And just what are you investing in? That's the big question, I think, too. Like, what are you investing in? It's not just hockey.
That's a great question to leave us with today. I will ask one last question here before we leave. Is there anything that you want to leave the listener with today based on our conversation? Mark Popovic, what do you want to tell people? And we can definitely do this again and cover more. And I appreciate your time, but is there a piece that you want to leave us with today?
And I hope I spark some thinking, reflecting. Sort of even like every time I have these conversations, this is what it does for me. I think this is what people need to have is conversations with their spouse or people that don't, get them out of that rat race of whatever it is in their life or raising their kids, and talk about it. Spend time reflecting and enjoy it. I certainly am with my kids.
Again, I appreciate your time. Where can people find you?
My hockey company is called Ignite Performance Hockey. That's where my summer camps and stuff is. We own a Perfect Skating. It's called. It's a small group skating coaches with Sean Allaire, the Avs coach. We do that one together. So there's two companies. Ignite Performance Hockey. If you want to come out to Denver and do some hockey camps, we'd love to have you.
We'll see you this summer.
Yeah, you'll be out here in Little Max too. I love it.
I will. We can't wait. But thank you so much for today. Again, this is episode 10, the Raising Men podcast. I'm here again with Mark Popovic. This has been an incredible conversation on raising young men, raising men in general, and raising young athletes. So Mark, thank you so much for your time.
Awesome. Thank you.
You have a great day.
You too.
Take care.